Hey guys, this is going to be my work in progress for the HGUC Kshatrya. So this is really only going to cover a couple really quick things, just because, as I mentioned in the review of this kit, there's just a few fixes that I basically just, like, the arm is the only thing that really needs to be fixed, and I just want to go over showing you guys how I've done that here with this one that's already been fixed and primed, and then I'm going to show you the process here on this one. And then just doing the painting on the sleeves, on the chest, and on the arms. I'm going to do the reverse wash on that. So we'll come back to that stuff in a moment. But first, let's take a look at the arms here. You can see the issue here with the arms is that we have a seam line on the sides, and then this part for the upper arm, seam line on there. Now, not going to be too easy to just glue that together and then fix it together, but then the problem is then if you want to paint this joint, part of the elbow joint, a different color, it's going to be a lot of masking and just kind of annoying, and it would be much easier to just have those parts separate so that you can just paint them separately and then put them back together. But the problem is that you can't glue these together and then be able to remove this gray part on the inside without doing some cutting. So what I've done with this one, I've already removed the seam lines on here. So you can see the seam lines there are gone. And I've made this so that this can pull apart. And there we go. I can paint this separately, and then when it's all done, actually this stays together pretty well, but just to make sure that it's going to stay together perfectly well, I will glue it. Maybe, I mean, I actually probably don't really even have to glue it, but just to be safe, I will glue that in the final assembly. But it's going to be really simple for us to be able to fix that here, so let me just show you. Let me take these parts apart. Alright, so the first step is the upper arm. You can see the way this goes together is quite unique, so it's a little bit specific for this kit. Now, ideally, you'd want these parts to be able to fit together just on their own, but actually there's no peg that actually holds these parts together just on their own, so that makes it a little bit trickier than usual, but it really doesn't make it too tricky at all. So the first thing is I'm just going to glue these parts together, and what I'm going to do first is just with a sanding stick, just kind of lightly sand the edges of this, just so the glue will have more to hold on to. Alright, then before gluing that, I'll come back to the arm here, and you can see we've got, basically what I want is just make this square center part to be able to fit up through here. So when these are joined together, you'll see there'll be a square hole like that I want this to be able to fit into. So that means I need to get rid of these pegs here on the side, so I'm just going to first cut off these pegs here. Like that, then I'm going to just cut off these round parts. And then just clean up that cut so it's nice and smooth along there, just using my knife. Alright, so that part's all good to be able to fit into there. So just before I glue this, I'll just show you, we'll test it out, and you'll see it doesn't fit, still doesn't fit. That's because these pegs on the inside are in the way, so I'm going to need to cut those as well. Alright, so that's messy in there, but it doesn't matter, it's going to be on the inside. The point is that the part is going to be able to come through. I'm just going to maybe clean up some of this a little bit, because it's kind of hard to me to clip that with my nippers. Just clean up a little bit more with my knife here on the inside. Alright, so those are well hollowed out. Now I can glue these together. Just the same as you would typically glue a seam line. Just using some extra thin cement, and gonna apply some to both sides, both parts. This stuff dries pretty fast, so I'm putting it on as thick as I can possibly get without being too messy. But again, as well, even if it is a little bit messy, it's not really that big of a deal. I'm just going to sand it up anyway. So I compress these together and then line them up, because they're flat on one side, by just pressing them down and pressing them together like that, because they're flat here on the bottom. So I know, just putting them down on my cutting mat and then pressing them together, and they should line up just fine. And you can see I got a nice little bead of glue coming out there along that seam. That's a good sign. That means that it's fitting together nicely. That means it's going to be pretty simple, easy to sand that. So this part is done. I'm not going to slide it over this. I'm going to wait a little bit to let that glue dry before I test this. I'm sure it'll fit fine, but we'll set that aside for now. Okay, now for the lower arm, what I've done, I've gone ahead and taken these parts away from the joint. And as you can see, we're basically just going to do the same thing. I'm just going to be removing these pegs here so that once these parts are glued together, this can just slide onto there, no problem. Now, the nice thing is that this part can be glued together without removing anything on the inside. And this does have some pegs to hold it together. So just gluing this is simple, don't need to do anything with it. So just going to run a good amount of glue into that seam. Just press it together. This one as well is glued. Now I can set it aside to dry. This will be glued enough, like it'll be a strong enough bond after just a few minutes, but it would be best to leave it at least overnight to fully cure, to fully harden. Even 24 hours would probably be a good idea before you start sanding away at it, just to make sure that everything is nice and dry. So just because it's dry to the touch, don't think that it's ready to start sanding it. Now for this guy, the first thing I'm going to do is remove these pegs. They're shooting across my room here. Now that looks like it should just be able to fit into there, but because of this part here on the back, that is also going to be kind of getting in the way. I do need to clip this peg here on the back as well. There we go. It's kind of a hard angle. It doesn't just fit straight into there because of this part here for like the elbow, so it kind of has to go in like a little bit at an angle. So because of that, this part on the front is too long, so I'm going to clip a little bit of that too. Clip that down. I could probably clip that all the way back, but just to be safe, I'll leave a little bit of that, and then this will be able to fit into here like so. It'd help if I cleaned up that joint first. There we go. Alright, look like so. There we go. There we go. No problem with that, and just to test this, should be dry enough now, at least just for a test. We'll slip onto there like that, and then there we go. So wait till tomorrow till this glue is dry enough, and then just sand that, and then when it's all primed, it'll have a nice arm like this with no seams, and it's easily disassembled for painting.